Greetings, fellow Mist Wanderers. My name is Steve Morgan, and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. This is a fairly new channel. This is the fourth video overall, I want to say, and it's the first one dedicated just to Ravenloft. I'm pretty excited. For my Ravenloft videos, I wanted to kind of cover individual domains and say, this is how I ran it. I've done a few Reddit posts already. I'll post some screenshots from titles there, where I basically just said, this is how I did it. It's not necessarily an end-to-end adventure, but I hope it's something that's useful to people and helps inspire you guys for when you do your running of Ravenloft as a campaign. I've done, well, coming up we'll likely have for Kovnir, including the Siege, so the 5th edition version with Vladeska and zombies, the Sea of Sorrows, Valachan, which I'm going to run soon, but I've already done a this is how I'm going to do it type post. I might do Naranjan because it feels a bit like cheating because I mostly borrowed someone else's stuff and then added little bits to it. So we'll see about that one. So as I said, a lot of these videos will be based on Reddit write-ups I've already done, but I haven't done one for the Carnival. And I know that other people have produced videos or Reddit posts or blog posts covering different domains. I don't think I've seen a lot of content for the Carnival. So I thought I'd start with that one, and that's one I haven't covered on Reddit, other than the occasional post, some of which I'll link to in the description below as I kind of go through it all. I think the important thing to talk about is how to treat the Carnival. I think the Carnival is a bit of a tricky domain because it's not really like a domain the players can get stuck into and then they've got to try and fight their way out of it, which would be more true for things like for Kovnir or Valachan. With the Carnival, I kind of treat it more as almost like a stopover, like a stopgap between domains. In my game, they did Curse of Strahd, then spent some time in Fort Kovnir, and then before going on to places like the Sea of Sorrows and Mordant, they went to the Carnival. It was nice, kind of, a bit of a reprieve, but not entirely, because it's not a safe place. It's not, even though it's a carnival, it's still quite creepy, still quite unsettling. Just to warn you as well, there's going to be minor-ish. It's hard to say whether it's a minor or major spoiler, but for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, another 5th edition adventure, there's actually a tie-in between the Ravenloft Carnival and the Witchlight Carnival, which I'll talk about later. Okay, let's talk about resources. So beyond what's written about the domain in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, I would recommend picking up Carnival, the original 2nd edition module. I found this useful because although Van Richten's Guide, I tend to use Van Richten's Guide as a starting point and then dive into other people's resources, whether official or fan-made, to get more of an understanding. The cool thing about the Carnival from 2nd edition is that it obviously gives you a bit more background about some of the acts it talks about, such as Tyndall the Barker. There's also more information about Isolde. I actually got a really good introduction for the, when I talk about Tyndall later, I'll kind of do the introduction I did, which I've already posted on Reddit. And that came from the 2nd edition module as well, so I'm glad I picked that up. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure is useful because it's a carnival. It's obviously, because it's set in the Feywild, it's quite whimsical, it's quite interesting and colourful, so it's kind of like the antithesis to Ravenloft Carnival, which kind of becomes obvious when you realise the link between the two. I found it useful because it's got carnival games listed in there and just other stuff that you can sort of borrow and repurpose for the purposes of the Ravenloft Carnival. Some of the games I used but kind of flavoured them to be a bit more gothic, a bit more grim, rather than being all like magical and whimsical, that kind of thing. I also found quite a few good guides on DM's Guild, Dark Carnival, the Carnival of the Tears. I'm going to put these links in the description, by the way, to where you can find them on DM's Guild. There were a few others that I found were quite handy. I'll include them as well. For the map, I found this excellent map on Incarnate by a user named ShaneJoyer94. There's also a player-friendly version that doesn't have things labelled. And if you look at Shane's main profile, you'll see he's done like the classic Ravenloft core maps as well. So clearly a Ravenloft fan. And then what I did for I used Shane's map for the Carnival as a whole. But then when I had a few combat encounters, what I did is I made very basic maps using Dungeon Draft. that are zoomed in. So you'll see, I'll share them on the screen now. You'll see this one's kind of like the bottom by the entrance. This one is the Litwick Market outside some of the stalls. And this one is just sort of near the tents in the northwest outside a wagon. And I did this because I had different combat encounters planned around those areas. They're all posted on Reddit for free. I'll share a link in the description. Help yourself. Hopefully they're useful to you. Full disclosure, I am not a map maker. I'm very much a novice, so I wouldn't say that they're the best things in the world, but it's good to have something, right? In terms of music, I really struggled to find good music for the carnival. I wanted something that was, well, obviously suitable for a carnival, but not like really cheery, something a bit gothic, something a bit dark. I am a big fan of tabletop audio, whose music is available in Roll20 or a lot of the music is available in Roll20 by default. And in the past, I've done a post, and I'll probably do a video soon of which tabletop audio songs suit different parts of Curse of Strahd. Might do a Ravenloft version as well. And although tabletop audio does have a carnival ambience, it's very much like a traditional carnival. So it sounds like a fairground ride, kids, cheering and playing and all that stuff. So obviously not very fitting. And then I came across a song they've done called Myconid Colony. And it is, at least in my opinion, it is perfect. It's how best to describe it. It's got that kind of whimsical feel, but it's a little bit creepy and it's a little bit unsettling. So I think it's perfect. It's got as far as a Ravenloft Carnival is concerned, I think it fits the bill perfectly. So I recommend you check that out. Let's talk about some of the NPCs. So Tyndall the Barker was a really important part of my campaign because I did a second Tarokka reading. For any of you who've seen some of my other videos, I put out a product on DM's Guild. I will do the little, here's a picture of here's type thing. And the second Tarokka reading is like Madame Eva's Tarokka reading in Curse of Strahd. It ushers the players to magic items and a fated ally spread throughout all the domains of Dread. And when I did it in my game before releasing it as a resource for other DMs, the carnival was one of the locations, and they were told to seek out the amazing soulless man who is Tyndall the Barker. So I made sure to really understand Tyndall, who he was, how to roleplay him. I kind of went with almost like a Cockney geezer type thing. For those of you who watch EastEnders, I probably think it's probably more like a really bad Oliver Twist type of accent. And I even lifted, this is another testament to the original second edition module, I even lifted the introduction he gives to the players and other people when they first arrive to the carnival. I lifted that from Carnival 2E as well, which is the following. Welcome one, and welcome all. Welcome to the big, welcome to the small, welcome to the short, and welcome to the tall. Welcome angels, welcome fiends, welcome all from walks between. Welcome to our carnival. Like I said, it's probably not the best. I'm not a big fan of doing accents, but I couldn't help it with Tyndall. Apologies to any Londoners watching it who think I've just butchered your regional dialect. There's a bit more to that. So I posted this on Reddit, plus a bit more where and again, I lifted this from the Carnival module where he says there are 2 rules: do no harm and pay your way. Which essentially, if you hurt anyone, you'll get kicked out, or if you steal from us. And then, if you want to join the carnival, you've got to contribute somehow. You either be an act, or if you can't do that, you cook food, mend clothes, blah, blah, blah. So, like I said, that'll be in the description. I'll post afterwards. I did miss the detail in Van Magician's Guide to Ravenloft that describes him as being quite cynical. I just kind of played him as very suave, very charismatic, very cool, and very likable, or at least that's what I was kind of going for. In terms of stat block, and this becomes important when I talk about possible adventures later, I used the Illusionist or Illusion Wizard stat block, which originally appeared in Volo's Guide to Monsters and then got sort of redesigned when they did all the redesigning of various monsters in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. I thought that fit him well, because I think in the original lore, I read that he was an illusion wizard. That was his type of magic. Moving on to Alti, the Werehare. Alti had a brief role in my campaign. Interestingly, it doesn't specify Alti's gender, and I just assumed she was a she. But I remember somebody else talking about Alti in, like, I think Reddit or something, and that person said that they thought Alti was a he. So I guess it's whatever you think is best or whatever you want to do. But I defaulted to she. I actually wrote a rap in a past life many years ago. I was a singer-songwriter. I will spare you from doing the rap. I don't think I would do the rap. I'm not going to do the rap on YouTube and actually make that public unless I need something good out of it. Maybe if I reach like 1,000 subscribers. He says at the moment only having like 10. I'm not going to do the rap. If I have like 1,000 subscribers, I'll record the rap and humiliate myself. Why not? I'm not going to do the rap. I've committed it now. Can't go back on that. I did write the rap and put it on Reddit. Again, I'll include a link in the description. My players liked it, so who knows? Hopefully yours will too, at the point of, degrading yourself as a DM like I did. And then stat block were rat, but instead of transforming into a rat, transform into a hare, obviously. I don't think I did much with some of the other performers. I think I mentioned them briefly. I haven't got them in my notes, but off the top of my head, it was Amelia the Vampire, Celesta the Snake, somebody the Fire Eater. I did do Hermos. Hermos was so Hermos is a half giant, and I kind of just role-played him as, I'll get to Isolde in a minute. Isolde is quite sort of intense and quite serious, quite unforgiving. I played Hermos, who's really relaxed, really like, Isolde, if you start killing everyone you suspect to be an evil fae, we're not going to have any customers left. That kind of attitude. He's just really chill, really cool sort of dad to the whole carnival, I guess. Stat block wise, I don't think there is a half giant stat block. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I just went with the half ogre stat block because it does the job. It's sort of, obviously, it's weaker than a giant. I kind of picture Hermos as like a half hill giant. It's weaker than that, I think. So it kind of fits the bill if you need a stat block for him. Moving on to Isolde and her evil magic sword Nepenthe. In the original module, she wasn't Fae. That's a 5th edition. And that's probably a tie-in to the Witchlight module I mentioned. I think now is a good time to talk about the tie-in that I said. And this is spoilers for Witchlight. I thought that this isn't very obviously laid out. It's obvious now once it's spelled out to you. But when I discovered this, I was like, I couldn't believe it. Basically, if you read about Isolde's backstory in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, it says she was originally the leader of a carnival in the Feywild. She swapped places with 2 Shadar Kai elves who were native of the Shadowfell, and she ran the Ravenloft Carnival, and these 2 Shadar Kai ran the Witchlight Carnival. Now, if you're familiar with Witchlight, I was very lucky. I didn't have plans to run it, but my players bought it for me as a birthday gift one year, which is very nice of them. If you read that, it says that the Shadar Kai who run the Witchlight Carnival were originally people who ran a Ravenloft Carnival. You can see where this is going, or a carnival in the Shadowfell. So Isolde used to run the Witchlight Carnival, which was probably had a different name because the people who now run the Witchlight Carnival are called Mr. Witch and Mr. Light. And Mr. Witch and Mr. Light used to run the Ravenloft Carnival, the Shadowfell Carnival. So that's really cool that there's some tie-ins there. So you could consider having a look at the Witchlight stuff, and it kind of fleshes that out a bit more. Anyway, I've gone a bit off track. I was talking about Isolde and Nepenthe. She has her own stat block in D&D Beyond. Don't make the mistake I made of creating a Cambion stat block with a magic sword when it's already there for you. And I just played her as I think I mentioned earlier, very intense, very unforgiving. One of my players really didn't like her because she was, I'll get to an adventure later on about adventures or things that happened at the carnival, but there was a monster attack, and she was basically like, if I find who's responsible for this monster attack, I'm going to kill them because they're a danger to the carnival. One of my players really didn't like that, and she was like, rather than, she comes across as a bit of a dictator and a bit of a ruthless leader. But unlike, say, some of the ruthless leader dictators in some of the other domains of Dread, hers, because of her backstory, I would say things like, people died in my care because I failed to look after them. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Or things like, this carnival is my family. We always protect family. Stuff like that, really. Professor Picali I included briefly. There was no combat involved with Professor Picali, but I think I used the Master Sage, or was going to use the Master Sage stat block from Candlekeep Mysteries, so you might want to have a look at that one. The picture I've included is just the sort of default Sage or Master Sage. That's not the picture I would use for Professor Picali. The good thing about, again, the second edition Carnival module is there's more artwork for people, including Professor Picali. Let's talk about the Litwick Market. So in the book, it suggests that there can be fey bargains. You can have a lot of fun with that. I might do that later. As I said, the Carnival's kind of like a stopover domain, so it's part of my sort of Ravenloft domain hopping campaign. They visited the Carnival twice. I can easily see them visiting it 3-4 times, so I might be cruel and include it in like a later. So they'll trust the stalls there as well, and then, you know, if they meet a fey and enter into some sort of bargain, that could be a problem later on down the line. But I was quite sort of, I kept it varied and quite interesting, quite different, but I kept it quite basic. So there was a general store, just the typical sort of player's handbook items, adventuring gear, 25 gold or less. I described the person who's run it as a very ordinary looking human, which I'll get to later. It's quite funny when you know who or what they actually are. I included a magic tattoo stall. I used the information and the picture from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything of a orc tattooist, and he ended up offering them side quests. So he could only do tattoos up to, I think it was uncommon originally, common and uncommon, and then they had to try and source more tattoo designs or research for him. So I said, oh, there's someone on the Sea of Sorrows, seek out this pirate who's covered in tattoos. And then once he got that information back to him, he could then do rare tattoos. And then if they get more, he can do very rare, and so on. Magic item trades. So I had I called them Neela and Grump. Neela is I was going to use Warlock of the Archfey stat block if there was ever any combat. Grump is a boggle. And you can't buy magic items, you can only trade. So it was kind of good. At this point in the campaigns we'd done, my players had quite a few spare magic items they didn't use. They'd given some to some of their NPC allies, some nobody was using, so it was a bit of a good way to be able to say, right, we can trade 2 or 3 uncommon items for some other stuff. And it's basic stuff, things like one of them was like a bag of holding. They hadn't had a bag of holding up until that point, and a few other things. I included a Mist Talisman seller as well. So for Mist Talismans, using the information from the Richard's Guide, using a Mist Talisman can help you get to a domain of your choosing if you have a Mist Talisman for it. Later on, I introduced a prosthetics person, which was handy for post Valachan, because there's I'll do this when I do the Valachan video, but there's the risk of amputation and stuff like that in Valachan. And I did a love potions thing where I can't remember the exact mechanics, but I basically lifted it off a old Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode. I think it was like season 1, where for those of you who know your Buffy, Xander tries to get someone to fall in love with him, and in the end, everyone but that person falls in love with him. So it's going to be like a reverse love potion. One of my players actually bought it and has yet to use it, and I'm just dreading that they'll like use it on like a Dark Lord or something, and then like everyone will want to try and kill him and the Dark Lord, as they're madly in love with the player, or the player's character. So just stuff like that, really. And the cool thing is like it changes every time they go. So the Mist Talisman and the Love Potion person's gone. The prosthetics person's arrived. It's kind of always changing. So it's every time they go, there's something new there, or something old has gone. So if they think, oh, we're not going to bother buying Mist Talismans this time, and then come, and leave it, then they potentially miss that opportunity. So let's talk about things that happened. So I they arrived, they met Tyndall. Tyndall had a magic item that they wanted to get to because it was pointed to them through the second Tarocca reading. While they're talking to him about it, there's some screams in the carnival. Amelia the vampire flies over with her leathery wings and says the Sorrowsworn has been sighted. Isolde's trying to fight it off, but is struggling. Tyndall says, please, can you help us? The players run to where the Sorrowsworn is and help Isolde defeat it. I used the Sorrowsworn are kind of like, I think they're like Shadowfell mist monsters. There's about 4 or 5 different variants. They're pretty like tough. Like I've run a few different ones now, and they've almost always resulted in a player being at least KO'd and nearly killed. A player character, not player. I used the Hungry for this one. I previously run some of the others, such as I think the Lonely, the Wretched, and there's another one, the Lost, I think. They are originally detailed in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and then they got updated in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, and it kept trying to attack Isolde and nearly killed her, and they helped her. At that point, she uses the Nepenthe to close the borders and conducts an investigation as to who's responsible. They find out later it was actually one of Professor Picard's escaped monsters from his Hall of Horrors that's grown and become a menace. When Isolde finds that out, she goes to essentially kill Professor Picard, and my players kind of convinced her not to. And in the end, she said, "You were exiled." And he was like, "Fine, I'll go back to Dark on you, nasty lady." And then he packed his things and left, and now I've put a big close sign on the Hall of Horrors. Another thing that happened, this was on their second visit. So I mentioned earlier about how the person selling general adventuring gear was a very ordinary looking human. He was not a very ordinary looking human. He was an Anis hag in disguise and was waiting for a good opportunity to attack Isolde. One of the magic items that was available at the store at that time was a Gem of Seeing, and I had the person doing the trade say, "Oh, I've got it's in demo mode. Feel free to give it a try." And so one of my players' characters picked it up, was looking around, and then saw the person who ran the PHB items store was actually this giant, freaky-looking hag, and he was having deliveries at the time to the two of them. And they were both Anis hags. And then when they were approached, they were like, I role played them as like just really friendly and really chill. And they were like, oh, and my players talked to Isolde first and then confronted them. And they're like, "Oh, Isolde, what a shame. You've given us no choice but to kill you now." And then they transformed and there was a battle. Tyndall's mirror. So when they first visited the carnival and they were chatting to Tyndall outside his wagon, I said they peeked inside and saw this cabinet that was padlocked. On their second visit, Isolde collars the characters and says, "Listen, I think something's fishy about Tyndall." At this point, they got the magic item that they needed through the Tarocca reading. And she said, Alti, the werehair, started a relationship with Tyndall recently, and she's pretty upset because of things that happened. So my characters went and spoke to Alti, and she said that she was going to open it up because she heard it was a mirror and she just wanted to make herself, do a bit of makeup and stuff. And they were in the honeymoon phase of their relationship, so they were hanging around. And I'm not going into the details. You can use your imaginations. Let's keep this clean for YouTube's sake. And Tyndall went ballistic at her, and that's very uncharacteristic for the cool, suave, charismatic Tyndall. And then I was going to have it that if they spoke to Isolde was going to confront Tyndall, and then there'd be a big battle where Tyndall says, "Fine, I'll open the mirror." He opens the mirror and then brings all of the reflections out. This is touched upon in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft information, and in I think it's in like Mrpedia and some of the resources you can find online, by the way. Essentially, Tyndall the Barker isn't the true version of Tyndall. The true version of Tyndall is called Tyndufulus. He's been trapped in this magic mirror, and Tyndall's essentially taken his place. That's why he's got no reflection himself, because he is a reflection of the whole amazing soulless man thing. But a battle didn't happen. Instead, while Tyndall was distracted, they snuck into his wagon, opened the cabinet, found some sort of like a manual for it, and essentially he got sucked back into the mirror, and Tyndufulus got ejected. And I role-played Tyndall for you earlier as cool, suave, cockney geezer. Tyndufulus I was going to play as a really shy, struggling. He can't make eye contact. He's really shy, really nervous, and that was the whole reason he used the mirror, because he wanted to be more charismatic. But the charismatic version of himself tricked him, and he's been trapped in this mirror for he doesn't even know how long, but it's been years. I even did a really badly mocked up version of the Tyndall token with him wearing this fake beard. And if there had been a battle, they would have fought the different versions of Tyndall. So Tyndall the Barker is the charismatic version. There would have been an angry Tyndall, a sad Tyndall. I can't remember what else. But like the angry Tyndall would have just been attacking. The sad Tyndall would have just been like, "Oh, I don't care," and just sit on the floor, casting invisibility on himself. So it would have been quite an interesting battle, fighting for like different illusion wizards. All at once. But these things happen. It's a shame it didn't happen in my game. Maybe it'll happen in yours. I also did this cool thing where my players had previously done Forkovnia, and they realized that Eska was behind the zombie sieges, and when she was defeated, all the zombies disappeared. But they didn't want to just assume that that was all the zombie sieges over with. So my players went back to Forkovnia, and the next new moon after the previous, well, basically when the next zombie siege was due, and they were told there's no zombies in sight, and then all of a sudden they're like, somebody's approached from the northern gate. And they're like, oh no, who is it? And it's Tyndall saying, greetings one, greetings all, greetings from our carnival. And then the carnival parked itself outside of the car, and that was a good way to sort of reintroduce them to the carnival as well. And I think that's everything for now. Feel free to use and borrow whatever you like. Hopefully it's useful to you. I'd be interested to know how you ran the carnival. Feel free to drop a comment below on this video. If you were intrigued what I was talking about the second talker reading and how one of the items was at the carnival in Tyndall's possession, pick up the second talker reading on DM's Guild. It's pay what you want, but recommended price $10. It took a very long time to make. I came up with 3 clues for every location, so I think it's a total of like 162 clues for all the cards. And it's pay what you want, recommended $10. Even if you just chuck a couple of dollars my way, I'd really appreciate it, because I spent a lot of time and money because I didn't want to use AI. I was very tempted to use AI to help with the ideas for locations, but I didn't use any AI whatsoever. The cover was designed by an artist, a friend of a friend, and I like to make sure people are paid fairly. And at the moment I've made, it's not made much money back. So it'd be nice to at least, I'm not looking to profit from it. It'd be nice to make, if it made its money back though, so I'm not out of pocket by a huge amount. But anyway, yeah, give it a try. Even if you're not going to add it to your campaign, I'd be really excited to see people do an example draw and just find out what you've got, basically. Like I said, in the future, I'm hoping to do how I ran Forkovnia, how I ran Valachan, how I ran the Sea of Sorrows. At that point, I might have done more domains in my real life game, and then I might do posts for those as well. So feel free to subscribe. I might hopefully see those in the future. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.